and it gives some specific kind of guidelines that you can be aware of. And for those who are calling in or anticipate participating in the public process today, that might want to weigh in with public comment, you have the phone number there in order to access the line. And then if you're experiencing any technical difficulties, there's also a phone number where you can call or text. We will get rolling here in just a few moments. So thank you for being in the space. We appreciate your presence. And I'll be back to talk in just a few seconds. It is 3 after, and we have several of our executive steering committee members that are present. Welcome again into the space. If we could advance the agenda. Thank you. Today, here's an overview of what we're going to cover. Of course, our normal opening, which I will capture our attendance here in just a moment. Our chair will have a few opening comments. We will then go to public comment. I will go over our principles of agreement. We will have a project update, which also will have committee updates today. And then we will have an opportunity for Portland Public Schools and to give us an update. And then we will talk through our independent highway cover assessment. The work session 2 will cover our next steps. And so without further ado, let us begin our process today. If you could give me the next slide. Our principles of agreement with how we do work, how we have agreed to function in this space, and we've been incredible at it, and I want to thank you for it. Number one is that your voice matters. And what we mean by that is that the significance of you and the authenticity of you is extremely significant. It's important. And this space is created for you to weigh in and to share your thoughts. And so the second one then is to speak your truth, that you bring the authenticity and the reality of your capacity, experience, expertise into this space. And you do it in a manner where we, number 3, will listen for understanding. So our goal is to be clear around what it is that's being said, since everyone's voice matters and people are bringing their authenticity into the space, then we lean in to hear and grasp what someone is saying. So number 4 means that we deal with the issues and not people. There's a potential that in the midst of our leaning in, we may not see things the same or understand them the same way or agree with them, but that's okay. We don't attack people, we deal with the issues. And so number 5, we may experience some discomfort in that process. That's part of the growth process. We understand that. We ask that during that process, we remain respectfully engaged, fully recognizing that we won't wrap everything up today in a bow. So we expect and accept non-closure. our next slide. Right before going to public comment, let me do a roll call. So President Lynn Peterson.
Here, thank you.
Thank you. Steve Witter.
Present, thank you.
Kristen Sharon.
Present.
Thank you. Brendan Finn.
Good afternoon, Dr. Holt.
Good afternoon. Chair Simpson.
Here, sir.
Good afternoon. Dr. Ebony Amato.
I'm here, thank you.
Good to see you. Nate McCoy.
Present, thank you.
Good to see you. Marlon Holmes.
Good evening.
Good evening. Julia Brim Edwards.
Good afternoon, Dr. Holt and fellow committee members. Sorry, I'm going to be off screen. I have a background that I can't project up, so you're just getting me by audio today.
Well, welcome into the space. We're glad you're here. Are there any committee members that I missed? There's some names I don't see, but as you come in, we'll give you an opportunity, or as they come in, we'll give them an opportunity to be recognized. We're going to hear first from our vice chair of the OTC and the chair of the ESC, Chair Simpson.
I don't have a lot to talk about today, at least in the intro. I'm definitely just more intrigued and interested in to see what comes out of the dialogue and the presentations today. There's a lot of updated information that's really intriguing, and so I'm just, going to save my comments for that, and just kind of hope to get engaged with the others on that piece. So I'll punt for now, but I appreciate the time. Oh, and one quick flag. Sorry, that you mentioned earlier about the folks on the committee, and I guess we don't have to spend a lot of time on it, but I'm just asking real quick. Maybe you can help understand, but we have Robert Camarillo still on here, and I know he hasn't been to the past, 3 meetings, and so I'm just curious about that. And I know Jana just popped on too, I believe.
Wonderful, thank you. I've reached out to Robert and not been successful in connecting with him, but we are following up on that exact thing. Yeah. Thank you for highlighting that. Jana Jarvis.
Yes. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. I was just on another meeting talking about the Rose Quarter. Imagine that. So there you go.
Great. I hope it was positive things.
I reminded everyone that that is the section of freeway that feeds Oregon's economy. And that's why it's so important.
Thank you. Thanks for being here today. Let's move to the slide for public comment, please. And I want to give a caveat around this moment. This is the gathering of the Executive Steering Committee that's working specifically on the I-5 Rose Quarter project. Many of you by now are aware of the values that have been stood up by this committee. Our request has been, and our opportunity has been, to give space for individuals who are concerned about what's going on in this work to engage. Let me just give this further disclaimer. This is a meeting that is open to the public. It is not a public meeting. And what is meant by that is this is the meeting of the Executive Steering Committee, and the public has the opportunity to hear, watch, listen, and as identified, has a moment to engage. And it is valuable. Your thoughts, your concerns, we want to hear from them. We really want to elevate the voices of the African American community that have been so directly impacted by the interstate and how it impacted albino and albino community. So in light of that, we appreciate those who have, again, been historically engaged and involved, provided you do not have the opportunity for your voice to be heard today. There are other ways for you to engage, and you see some of those on your screen. For those who will be elevated to engage, you will have 1 minute for your comment, recognizing that 60 seconds is not a tremendous amount of time, but again, an opportunity to hear from you. And there are other ways to express your further concerns. So in light of that, is it Natalie or Amber who is identifying those who are in the queue?
So,
Dr. Holt. Oh, go ahead, Amber.
thank you, Dr. Holt. There are some people in the queue. Just a reminder to everyone that is in the queue to please press *9 to raise your hand. And then once you get in the queue, you'll be invited to speak, and press *6 to unmute yourself. Sorry, go ahead, Natalie.
Thank you for that. With that, I will go ahead and share my screen. We have a 1-minute timer just to keep us on track for today. And so hopefully everyone can see that. I'm gonna go to our attendees, and I'm seeing we do have some raised hands right now. So I will make my way down the list. We have a caller with the phone number ending in 8577. I'd like to invite you to make your comment now. And you may need to dial *9. Oh, hello?
Good afternoon. Can folks hear me?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. My name is Aaron Brown. You're about to hear a big presentation of the response ODOT got from the community survey they did for the independent cover story. The top issue that people who participated in the survey identified as a community health initiative was that they wanted to see any project at the Rose Quarter improve air pollution in the neighborhood. This seems like an unobjectionable goal, given that Tubman Middle School, which is majority non-white, has some of the worst air pollution in the state. The right to clean air seems like something we should clearly be pursuing, and apparently the community agrees. So it's certainly interesting that on the Albina Covers report, it ends with a footnote that straight up dismisses these concerns. The document essentially says that the people writing in to demand cleaner air were, quote, writing a political statement, and therefore their comments about air pollution aren't relevant to the survey. This seems baffling to me. Community members writing in to say, don't let ODOT widen the freeway if it'll pollute the air is somehow not germane to community health. This is just the latest example of ODOT cherry picking what community feedback they receive and legitimize. This is why No More Freeways, along with Elliott Neighborhood Association and Neighbors for Clean Air, filed a lawsuit. ODOT continues to ignore legitimate community-based voices concerned about how many lanes they are building and how much lung cancer and asthma you are going to give to future residents of the Albina neighborhood and students at Tubman Middle School. I encourage you to ask
time.
today,
Thank you
ask
for your
ODOT.
comment. And unfortunately, that's all we have time for. I'll move along to the next commenter. Chris Smith, please make your comment. Please unmute yourself.
Thank you and good afternoon. I'd like to express appreciation for the release of the 20% design memo. It was very interesting reading, but it references some 19 appendixes labeled A through S, and I would appreciate it very much if the project would release those appendices as well so that we can see what they say. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. We'll move now to the commenter with the phone number ending in 4524. Please make your comment now.
Hi, this is Joe Courtwright. I want to follow up on two things. First of all, at your last HAB meeting, the Historic Albina Committee meeting, the people who led the peer review, Grace Kronikan, repudiated the claim that ODOT has repeatedly made that the peer review's findings validate the project's environmental analysis. In fact, the peer review committee said that it didn't look at the transportation forecasts and their accuracy, and therefore can't say anything about whether those transportation forecasts correctly estimate the level of air pollution. So ODOT's claim that it's validated are wrong. And then second, I want to note that everything that No More Freeways has said about the 160-foot wide right-of-way and the fact that ODOT is preparing to build a 10-lane freeway, which would produce far more pollution than their analysis says, have been validated by every document that both we released and that now ODOT has released. And only if you allow us the opportunity to present information do these facts come to light. So if you're serious about engaging the public, you should give us the full opportunity to participate in this process.
Thank you. That is time. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for. We'll move to the next commenter. This is the phone number ending in 4027. Please make your comment.
Hello, my name is Tony Jones, and I'm the Chair of Economic Development for the Coalition of Black Men. Our key mission is wealth creation for Black men and families. For 15 years, I've worked to build the capacity of minority construction businesses with NAMAC Oregon. Number one, any remaining environmental issues must be resolved within the context of the current project timeline. The NEPA is complete. Why are we misleading the community that we can design highway coverage beyond the bounds of the NEPA? Two, our community wants ODOT to continue to prioritize the most important element in restorative justice, wealth creation, with the construction jobs that will be created from construction down. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Now we will move to the caller with the phone number ending in 9077. Please make your comment. Caller with the phone number ending in 9077. I think you are unmuted, but we're not hearing you. Okay, maybe we're having a technical problem there. We can come back to that caller. Phone number ending, let's see, we have Reverend Dr. Hennessy. I will invite you to make your comment now.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be with you this afternoon. I want to come once again to support the comments that Tony has already made before me. We recognize that there are a number of issues that need to be resolved as it relates to this project. But I want to say, as a pastor of this church and a person who's been in this community for 32 years, I want to remain on record as saying this is an important opportunity for employment. It's important for businesses. It's important for our community, and to stress the importance of economics in the form of living wage careers and entrepreneurship as the primary building blocks to a healthy community. I remain that way. I remain supportive of the project, and I want to see nothing that will cause any further delays. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we will move on. I'm seeing caller with a phone number ending in 4578. Please make your comment.
My name is Greg Taylor. I'm a lifelong resident of Portland, Oregon. I was on the design team for the Swan Island Pump Station, which was a $100 million job, and also on the design team for the Portland Building renovation project, which was a $300 million job. Worked for the city for 31 years, and I was responsible for 2 apprenticeship programs. Jobs is the most important thing associated with this project. Jobs are what living wage income for individuals is what is driving or why this project is most important. And my experience tells me that construction projects such as this give living wage jobs. But in particular, in the past, these construction projects have not given people of color the opportunity for wealth creation and for jobs. And this particular project, it has a focus for our community and for jobs within our community. If nothing needs to be replaced.
Thank you for your comment. That's unfortunately all we have time for. We need to move on. I'm going to now ask, let's see, let's go back to phone number ending in 9077 and see if we figured out that technical problem. Hello, phone number ending in 9077. And we are still not able to hear you. This is our last commenter, Dr. Holt.
Okay, thank you very much.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yes, we
Thank
can.
you. Very good. Thank you. I'm sorry. I had myself muted. So my name is Leonard Lambert. I'm a longtime resident of Northeast Portland for well over 60 years. I'm concerned a little bit, not so much on where we're at right now with the project. I'm sure you'll work all of that, but on how communication is being disseminated through this community in large, and the impact of the social, economic, and environmental impact that will have footprints for many years, but also for our communities here, people of color and others that have lived here, and look forward to these living wage jobs and what it can create, not just the wealth, but the opportunity for another step, hopefully up, what it can mean to people that are downtrodden during this pandemic. So I'm very much for it. I'd love to hear and see who is a spokesperson that you have designated for the community, so we can see how you can communicate better, and so that this project can move forward.
Thank you. That is time. And that was our last commenter, Dr. Holt.
Thank you very much. We appreciate each person and your voice weighing in on this opportunity. I appreciate that. There's much to be talked about and much to be done. We really want to make sure, I emphasized it before, but I want to say it again, that we're elevating the voices of those who are most impacted and most closely connected to this project and work. So for those who didn't get a chance to share, please follow the instructions that were given. Feel free to email and continue to correspond and interact that way. We'll be responding to questions that have been asked, and much of the information through the presentation should answer those. If they are not, then do make sure that you email so that we can respond appropriately. Moving forward, next slide. We're heading into our project updates. And I'd like to introduce, we're actually going to hear from some of the other committees that are at work. And our first committee that we're presenting is the Community Oversight Advisory Committee that is facilitated by John L. Bell. So John L., and I believe you have a co-presenter with you today. I'll let you introduce.
Dr. Holt, Janelle had a death in the family, so I will be presenting along with the JV. Is the JV on?
I'm here, Amber.
Okay, great.
We're expecting Jeff too. I don't know if he made it. Okay,
great. So I'll just give you a quick update, and the JV can jump in as well. The CMGC has provided a revised diversity plan, and at the last COAC meeting, they provided a date to their green sheet, which is essentially, it's a tool that allows them to analyze the DBE opportunities, and coming up in the future, it also is a tool that enables to really understand and hone the workforce that will be tied to this project. And I know, Nate, you were interested in that. I'm sure the JV can talk about that. But just some of the things that they discussed were the size of the range of opportunities given the 20% design. And I don't know, Jeff, if you want to talk a little bit about the range of opportunities that you articulated, and also like the number of mini CMGCs and some of those things. I'll yield to you.
Okay. Yeah, Matt, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself. Hi, everybody. I'm Jeff Moreland. I'm the president of Raymore Construction. I am on the executive team for this project for the Hunt Hamilton in association with Raymore Construction JV. I am the executive in charge of diversity and inclusion. As many of you know, I've been a long time Portland resident and a very strong advocate in the community. Matt is the project manager. I'll have him introduce himself, and he'll go down, and I'll close out our presentation. Go ahead, Matt, and tell them where we are with the community.
Thanks, and good afternoon. I'm Matt O'Connell. I'm the PM over with the JV. As Amber spoke, we've begun our work bailing into the 20% design submittal, we were able to assemble an estimate on the work, and in the form of it's broke down into actually over 400 different scopes of work. We refer to them as bid items, but they're really just individual scopes of work that we estimate. So we put together the first preliminary analysis of what we call our green sheet tool, which is the science behind what we'll state as our intentions and goals in the form of DBE subcontracting. And so we've estimated these 400 line items and then allocated what we believe based on experience can be achieved in the form of DBE contracting. That overall number was a range of $145 to $175 million. Amber did mention this mini CMGC idea that Bill Bruce and has been using for years here in the Portland area, where we actually work with the DBEs, and they have smaller firms under them. They act as a prime contractor and learn the ropes of being a prime and hiring subs. And we do anticipate utilizing that to enhance our DBE opportunities, and in the form of 3 to 5 of those scopes that we'll use. So we're excited to be getting going here and putting some estimates together and actually defining scopes that we can communicate to the DBE community about what's coming.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. So in general, guys, we're excited about getting going on this project as the CMGC. And you guys need to know that this is the first time I've been around a long time, fighting with ODOT, and ODOT has done a great job at bringing us to the table and allowing us to be able to do things differently. So I want to stress that to the ESC. I also want to stress that you're talking about 145, and this is preliminary. And in terms of the CAF assessment, we had to go with what was in the RFP because we're still waiting for the independent cover assessment to come through. So this is all preliminary. We have several design iterations that we still have to work through. Right now, we're at 20%, we go to 30%, 60%, 90%, all the way through IFC. So we have a long way to go, but it's looking extremely positive now when you start talking about 28% of this project. We believe that we can hit numbers including DBE community and people from our neighborhood, which leads to tons of jobs, and we'll have all the numbers in the future on what that actually looks like from a real economic standpoint for the community. So I just want to stress that need and to stress the fact that we're excited to get going, and we're just looking forward to, especially coming off of COVID-19. It's been tough for our community. Our community, marginalized communities, have been hit the hardest. And so the jobs are necessary for our community now. And so we just look forward to get going. And I'm open to any questions that anybody would like to ask. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Thank you very much. Thanks, Matt and Amber, for introducing that. I'm going to hold on any direct questions for ESC. I'm going to let our next facilitator present an update for the Historic Albina Advisory Board, and then let Director Channel give her update, and then we'll take all questions at that point. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. Erica Warren.
Good afternoon, Executive Steering Committee. I'll be brief and share with you the Historic Albina Advisory Board is a very in-depth group of community stakeholders and leaders that are meeting together to hear about the project and help to steer and give voice for the community. We will be hearing from the independent highway cover assessment team on tomorrow. The A&E team, the architects and engineers, have been doing an excellent job of presenting design elements, giving the HAB an opportunity to weigh in on things that they feel are best suited towards restorative justice within the historic Albina community. And we're looking forward to an opportunity to be able to collaborate with you all in the future, sharing some time to work together in a meeting coming up. So that's it from me.
Thank you very much, Erica. I appreciate that. We will go to our project director, Megan Channel.
Thank you, Dr. Holt, and good afternoon, Executive Steering Committee. I wanted to share a project design related update for you today, and specifically that we are having the team evaluate an alternative for the I-5 corridor that shifts the northern portion of the project's highway alignment to the west. This is in the area in the vicinity of Harriet Tubman Middle School. So it's really to explore an option that would not move I-5 any closer to the school site, really as an effort to minimize technical and construction concerns. And exploring this option to the west also is responsive to a lot of the feedback that we've heard directly from Portland Public Schools, as well as the community just around the project's proximity to the school site. So you can go to the next slide here. It just shows kind of that area in terms of the 26-foot shift that's currently contemplated towards the school would actually be performed under this alternative on the other side, on the west side. So we're at the infancy, early stages of this evaluation and are obviously reaching out to the two most impacted parties, Portland Public Schools. So starting communication with Portland Public Schools on this, as well as the businesses to the west, in particular Shin Shin Foods. We're exploring how that property may be impacted under this alternative with the shift in the alignment to the west, and again are in active communication to understand what options in that area might be from a design perspective in coordination with the property owner. So we anticipate continuing to share these concepts with you as the Executive Steering Committee for further discussion coming back in May. We'll likely have some broader community outreach as well around this. And the overall timeline for this work is between now and mid-July, when our design team will be able to come forward with some recommended alternative options for this area for the Executive Steering Committee's feedback and consideration. So just wanted to share with you that we're starting that work and excited to partner with you as we learn more about the alternative. And you can go to the next slide. And this exploration is really just one way that the project team is working to be responsive to concerns and incorporate feedback from the community and the Executive Steering Committee. You heard from some of our public commenters. We did recently release a 20% design package that reflects design modifications that were made during the NEPA process. This includes eliminating impacts to the East Bank Esplanade, exploring a continuous highway cover, as well as other multimodal improvements to address transit priority and just safer pedestrian and bicycle environments. These are all in response to partner feedback that we have received through our process. And just as a note, all of the appendices to that 20% design plan were uploaded with the reports last week. So everything, reports and appendices are available on the Rose Quarter project website. In addition, the project team has implemented a suite of actions kind of based on our environmental peer review for air quality in response to ESC and the HAB issues that have been raised, and we're actively working through those. We're continuing to respond to questions and provide information in addressing those concerns. This slide also just highlights different items that are shaping our ESC meetings moving forward and agenda development, really to be in direct response to your areas of interest. So as a start, first and foremost, the requested partners in standing up the ESC, we collaborated together on a charter to define our decision making and then receive the adopted values and outcomes from this committee. And building from that, we're actively developing performance measures, as you have requested, to make sure that we're evaluating our progress towards those values and outcomes. Many of these efforts are still in progress. We are exploring options for joint meetings with the HAB to ensure that we have that strong dialogue between community members and this Executive Steering Committee. We have ongoing coordination with TriMet regarding bus on shoulder and coordinating a presentation information with CTRAN in regards to that exploration as well. Providing opportunity for Portland Public School discussion in response to ESC requests. And we'll be diving deeper into project schedule and funding and financing as a future item. So most of this committee's work to date really has been focused on the highway covers and the independent cover assessment. And so we look forward to engaging the ESC on that, as well as these other topics and decisions that will inform our process moving forward. Really much like we did for the I-5 mainline design presentation on ODOT's regional mobility pricing project at your last meeting. We'll continue to take that forward, those types of issues forward, in addition to what you're hearing on the highway cover work. So at the end of this meeting, I'll be back to share our 6-month look ahead for the ESC areas of focus. And of course, we'll continue to make all efforts to be responsive to the questions that you are posing us. So with that, I will pause and turn it back to you, Dr. Holt.
Thank you very much. And there's a hand up from President Peterson.
Megan, thank you for the update and all of the work. I appreciate it. I know it's a lot. I guess my first question is regarding the movement to the west of the freeway. Is it all still within the existing right-of-way?
That is, we are exploring that. There are options where it would go outside of the right-of-way. And so we're, again, at the early phases, so we don't have a clear definition of exactly what we would need, but we do know that we would need some additional right-of-way in that area.
Okay, thank you. So my understanding is that the EA was based on the fact that you wouldn't be going outside of the right-of-way. So does that trip other things happening or requirements because of the fact that you would actually be requiring new right-of-way?
Yeah, right-of-way, as you're looking at that, we obviously will need to make sure that we're in coordination with Federal Highway Administration on that, and looking at whether the scope of that right-of-way really changes the order of magnitude of the impacts that were identified in the environmental assessment to determine the path forward.
Okay, thank you. And then you brought up the fact that the HAB and that you were responding to HAB issues. And I really appreciate that. But we just had a presentation where we had no briefing on what the issues are that HAB is bringing up. We had a briefing on what they would be listening to and hearing in terms of information. But is there any way, as I think we all asked at the very beginning of this, to be able to be kept up to date on the actual issues? I appreciate, Erica, your update, but I think I would like to have a rundown of what issues they're asking for, what issues we're asking for, and where they overlap. And it would just be really nice to know what we're missing because they are probably coming up with really good questions that we should be hearing the answers for, the question and the answer.
And President Peterson, I can just chime in there. I know that we've been trying to keep a running document to outline questions from the HAB members and then what some of those responses have been. So we can start that conversation with you by sharing that so that you can take a look at those things and again, measure where the executive steering committee might have overlap. And then we're hoping to do a collaborative meeting with you all as well.
Thank you so much. That's music to my ears. I'm wondering if we have, there's so much echoing, isn't there? I don't know if somebody's got dual machine.
Dr. Holt needs to mute.
I guess, is there a similar document that you've been keeping on behalf of the ESC of the issues brought up? Because I think that would be also an interesting document also to send back out, because right now it feels, and I think to Nate McCoy's comment at the end of the last meeting, what are those issues that you've heard and how, you know, on a monthly basis, just being able to go back through that list and being able to say, is this still an issue? Is it not an issue? Have we resolved it? That sort of thing. I think I'd like to talk more about that later, but I really think having both of those documents in front of us at all times would be very helpful.
Yeah, and President Peterson, I'll just note that we do have that running list for the Executive Steering Committee as well, and have been sharing that within the meeting notes each month. So we have that tracking sheet to note from our perspective if the item is ongoing or complete, and definitely welcome your feedback if we've missed something or feel like an item that we've marked as complete isn't resolved. Want to make sure that we're running that to course.
How do we know if we're not discussing whether it's complete and resolved?
I think you're highlighting a good point, and that we can make sure to provide some time on the agenda to reflect on the notes that include that matrix in order to bring up those issues.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you. I've noticed a few other hands go up. Brendan, I noticed yours, and I see Jana Jarvis. We'll go in that order. Brendan, did you have your hand up?
Oh, I will defer to Jana. I'll go after.
Jana.
I have no idea why you would, but I will go. In the context of getting this follow-up information, I would like to see us get the packets of information in enough time to review it prior to the meeting. I got my information at 1:06 today. I have been in nonstop meetings since 7 this morning. And so I am ill prepared for some of the conversation that we're going to have this afternoon. And I would certainly hope we would have at least a weekend in the prior weekend or something, because particularly during the legislative session, there's a lot going on. And so while it'd be great to have the information, having it in a timely fashion would be even better. So thank you.
Thank you for highlighting that. Brendan?
Yeah, no, maybe I didn't want to. I'm just kidding, Jana. Well, I just, Dr. Hold on, thank you. I have to take this opportunity to give a shout out to Project Director Megan Channel, the A&E team, and the CMGC. When we started this process, I think you, Chair Simpson, asked me what restorative looked like, and I said turning back the clock and undoing the 1950s approach to big infrastructure projects. I think before we were talking about things, we didn't want to just have words, we wanted to have action. Now that list that was just up there is the result of a lot of work, hard work by the project team and the advisory boards. I just want to give a shout out to you, Megan, and the team and the CMGC for responding to what you're seeing, to reacting to our values. So since I am able to take the floor, I'm going to take it right now and say that. So good work.
Thanks, Brendan. Any other question, comment from the Executive Steering Committee for any of the project updates? All right, Erica, you wanted to mention one other item, and then we'll go to the next item on our agenda. Okay. Well, we will go to our next item. Our Portland Public Schools update. Now I will defer to you, Julia Burnett.
All right, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Thank you. I think as Courtney Westling's here as well, as we mentioned last time that this spring is a particularly, and specifically the last 2 weeks has been a really busy time for our senior facilities and operations staff, who are the same people who would directly engage with us on this project. They've been reopening schools, and I'm pleased to say that that's happened, both our middle schools and our high schools, after the school buildings being closed. Having said that, we did have an opportunity to have a meeting with senior staff to speak about the developments that have occurred over the last month and talk about the district's next steps, and also our engagement with the state and ODOT. And you know, first of all, we're planning on bringing like vetting and preparing the outlines a proposal of what our engagement would look like, and our thoughts on Harriet Tubman Middle School as it relates to the current design. In addition, we've requested that ODOT come and present to the school board on the project. There are a lot of questions that people have that ODOT would be best prepared to respond to. And then third, and this Megan referenced it earlier, but the new development of ODOT potentially looking at directing staff to also develop a design option that does not move the freeway closer to Harriet Tubman Middle School, which is a pretty significant development. And we're interested in hearing more about this and really appreciate the state team and others thinking through, how to wrestle with, an issue that is historically been, an issue for the students and families at Harriet Tubman. So we're looking forward to more information about that, and have had conversations with Brendan Finn about how we might share sort of the two tracks, the sort of the previous, the established or baseline design that gets 26 feet closer to Harriet Tubman, and then second, this new proposal, what that might mean. And then we also, in the spirit of, continuing to click down as we move forward, of what other things we need to see is highlighting for Brendan and the ODOT team the need to have a better understanding of what sort of mitigation would be happening during construction. So even if you didn't move the freeway 26 feet closer to Harriet Tubman, certainly there's construction impacts, and we want to better understand those, and what ODOT is thinking, what that might look like. So we're interested again in getting more details and more engagement. And then we also have had a discussion with senior staff about community engagement, and that, what that might look like. Certainly we want to hear from our school community. And it sounds like now we should have probably engagement around a couple different options that might be possible. The new option that Megan referenced, which is to move the expansion would be moving west, and so it's just managing through the construction. That's one, and leaving Harriet Tubman where it is. The second would be if the original design proposal stays as it is, what that would mean for the school, and also what it would mean for the school, well, long term, but also during the construction phase. And then third, if the sentiment is that if the freeway moves 26 feet closer to Harriet Tubman, and the air quality continues to be at levels in which are not healthy for our school community, if it were to be moved, is that something that the community would support? And if so, what would be the process for that decision making and the funding of that? So we have all those pieces sort of in flight and moving, and I say I appreciate ODOT coming to us with some thinking about some alternatives, and we look forward to exploring that further.
Thank you very much, Julia. I appreciate it. Understanding all the moving pieces you just identified, and in the midst of getting kids back to school. Questions at all for Julia from the Executive Steering Committee?
Quick question, Dr. Holt.
Yes.
Julia, thank you for those updates. Really appreciate that we've been able to get this kind of on the agenda. And I think you remember from prior conversations, I'd love, in the essence of SMART goals, to kind of think about if there's any kind of time boundness relative to this conversation, because I couldn't agree more that I think most in the community might agree that to figure out a relocation plan for the students might be the best alternative. I mean, I'm one voice, but would love to understand how community would be actually engaged from PPS's perspective, ODOT's perspective. Love the idea you threw out there about ODOT presenting at the PPS board meeting. I'm sure Brendan will figure that out. But all in all, I just want to make sure that there's a community bought-in process that you described, Julia, and wanting to just make sure that, if it made sense, that there's some time boundness to this conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Nate. And believe me, every time this topic comes up, I hear your voice in my ear about sort of where is the PPS community. And we did have the board intergovernmental committee had a meeting, I think in the last 2 weeks, and had a pretty lengthy discussion. And there's a variety of views on the board, and about sort of the process forward. I will say there is, I believe, agreement with the senior staff and Courtney and myself that we need to have this community conversation and creating a time bound. So for school communities, the best time for us to have conversations with the community usually is when school's in session. I mean, just because during the school year, that's usually when families, more of them can participate. So we're looking at our process of trying to describe and define what those, we had 2 options, but now ODOT's put a 3rd one on the table, what those might look like, and kind of looking at the end of May for being able to describe that. I think I say, I don't know what the at the moment status of ODOT coming to present to the board, but that should happen sooner rather than later, just so that there's a lot of different information out there, and I think it would be good just for people to have their questions answered, and also to hear more about both the sort of quote alternative design, and then second, sort of the construction mitigation work. And I can't speak for our Office of Student and Family Engagement, but I would hope sooner rather than later, because our opinion, our point of view should be informed by that. And we know that this process is moving forward, and want to stay aligned and have our community's point of view informed by informing this group, and also ODOT's work ahead.
Thank you very much. President Peterson.
Julie, I just want to say thank you for all that you're doing on behalf of the community in terms of COVID and getting kids back to school. So I really appreciate how difficult it's been to do both of these things at the same time, but I also appreciate your moving this forward in a way that allows for the community to give their opinion and learn as well, and come to hopefully come to some sort of conversation about the future and what can make it better for the kids. So I just really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. I say we know that we appreciate everybody's patience. Just this, as with a lot of other entities, this has been a year unlike no other, and I do think we have some space and time, and we've got, because we also have BESC that's in the vicinity. Obviously, that's another piece that we're looking at, and we appreciate President Peterson, Metro's engagement with us in those conversations as well.
Thank you, Julia, for your presentation. I know that you and I covered several things in our meetings. I don't know if you wanted to reference at all part of the conversation that's been in the wind. It's the Center for Black Excellence. I don't know if you want to make any comment in regard to that.
Yes, so there's in the 2020 bond that passed there was $60 million for the Center for Black Student Excellence. And the school board was very clear with the voters that that would be a sort of co-created with the community, and it may or may not be a place, which I think is a really important concept. It was, the initiative is focused on our schools that are in historic Albina. One thing I would say for sure is that those funds would not fund a moving of Tubman. That's because that's not what they were intended for. But there is an active community conversation being led by the district about what that looks like. And for sure, it could be a host of sites. It could be programs embedded in the schools in Albina, but it's yet to be defined. But I guess I want to just be clear that it will not be, it's not a sort of moving fund, because that would not actually, really have any impact on the student achievement and elevating and accelerating student achievement for our Black students.
Well, thanks, Julia, so much. We look forward to this robust conversation, so many elements and aspects that are going on. And again, kudos in the midst of a year like none other and a time like none other. Any other questions for Julia? Thank you. We will move forward in our agenda. Our next portion is with the Independent Highway Cover Assessment Team. And we have put forth quite a bit of energy to keep the presentation within confines around time. A couple of disclaimer statements in regard to that. This is quite a bit of information, and we don't want to shortcut what they need in order for the Executive Steering Committee to get what it needs so that good decisions can be made. So possibly today, there may be, as we are getting closer to our time, the need to extend some moments for conversation to happen, for engagement to happen. I appreciate the effort and the energy of the Independent Cover Assessment Team, and appreciate and value your time, Executive Steering Committee. I'm going to do my best to help the process stay within the confines, but I did want to give the disclaimer in order for us to make sure that you're able to do what you need to do as the Executive Steering Committee might request a little more of your time back. So with that introduction, Independent Cover Assessment Team.
Thank you, Dr. Holt. We're glad to be here. Chair Simpson and ESC members. We're kind of at a critical juncture in our process, and so it's important that we've been able to secure time on your agenda today, and we want to thank you for that. As most of you know, my name's Gina Woolley, and I'm the ICA team's lead and community engagement consultant and facilitator. And we are here today to, share with you 5 design concepts. They're not scenarios at this point. Although we have done preliminary evaluation on their feasibility, and we have done some technical analysis, including interfacing with the ODOT technical team to allow them to ask us questions and to get their feedback about various aspects of each of these concepts. So there has been some work done. We've not completed a detailed feasibility analysis or a trade-off analysis. That's the next stage of our work. And we know that this will be important for you to consider for a final recommendation to the OTC. So this is our next step of work and what we're hoping to do today is to actually narrow these concepts down to a couple that we can do that additional detailed analysis on. I guess I feel the need at this point, given that just the presentation of these ideas, particularly given the departure of some of these ideas from the existing design concept, ODOT's 20% design concept, have caused a lot of commotion. And I think we're at a stage that is too early for people to be sort of developing camps and we haven't done the kind of analysis that we need to do in the trade and looked at all the trade-offs. And we certainly understand how important the work that has been done related to Black contracting and workforce development is to this community. And it is part of what we will be taking into consideration and weighing as we try to look at these concepts in more detail. I think what's important to understand relative to our team's work is we aren't trying to, create a new, we're part of the overall body of folks that are seeking to improve ways to deliver this project so that it creates greater community benefits. That's our charge. And what we've done to date is we've actually designed concepts that are responsive, that are more responsive to the feedback that we've heard from Black historic Albina community members that have been in our workshops. So, the Black community is not monolithic. Most of you know that I've been in this community for 60 years myself. So we understand that, that it's not monolithic. We have different stakeholders. Our objective, the ICA team's objective, is to try to create, it's not an either or, it's a plus, it's an and. And I think that we're looking to be able to complete our work before people, to examine all of this and bring it forward for everybody to look at it objectively and to weigh the benefits. The ESC is who will be making this decision. Our team won't be making this decision. We will frame up the work as we've been charged to do, and then it will be weighed at the ESC level, and the final recommendation will be made at that level. So what I would ask as we move into do this work moving forward is that people kind of give us an opportunity to determine whether there are ways that the project can be improved, that the cover designs can be improved, and will provide greater benefit to the community without creating issues that would upset the apple cart. There are lots of unanswered questions in terms of the timeline as it stands. I mean, Megan raised another issue, where you don't know when you're trying to solve a problem, whether it's going to take you outside the confines of the EA assessment. We don't know to what degree any of these concepts fall outside of the EA. We're making some gross assumptions, but in this next stage of work, we'll do the detailed work to determine how correct those assumptions are. So I would really request that everyone sort of stand down and let us do our work and let us bring that work forward, and understand that we consider ourselves a partner. And our goal is to create benefit for the Black community. We're dealing with a different group of stakeholders who are looking at this project in terms of what it delivers differently related to the cover design and land on the cover than perhaps the COAC group is looking at it, but all of it's important. And we would just like to be able to complete our work so that, the ESC in its wisdom could decide what they think is appropriate in terms of making sure all the greatest amount of benefits materialize out of this project for the Black community. So having said that, we have limited time today. So I would ask that you guys, that the members hold their questions and their comments till we get through our presentation. We'll have a chunk of time at the end to answer questions, but primarily to discuss. We have key questions we need feedback from you on in order to move our work forward. So with that, what I'd like to do is I would like to move to the next slide, please. This is our agenda today. What we'll be going over, we'll be moving through this material pretty quickly so we can get to the discussion period. Next. And what I would like to do now is I'd like to turn it over to Nolan so he can just remind you of what our process, what the ICA's process is, where we're at in it, and what we've been charged to do. Nolan?
Thanks, Gina. So those of you who have been attending these meetings have seen this graphic a few times before. The short summary is that it reminds everyone of the focus of our work around 3 work sessions. The first took place in February and was focusing on really listening to the community to understand their vision, assess the possibilities of how we might construct concepts and scenarios to support that vision. Work session 2 is what we're in right now, and that's really focusing on sharing the development concepts that you'll see today, gathering feedback from you, from the HAB, and from members of the community so that we might refine those into the scenarios that will be shown in work session 3 that will be refined, expanded upon, improved, and that will feed into the recommendation that this committee, the Executive Steering Committee, will make to the Oregon Transportation Commission in July. So that's still the plan. Next slide. And again, as a reminder of what are the guidelines that we've been given about the scenarios that we should end up with in this process. The base case is the NEPA environmental assessment and all the assumptions that went into that. Our team will be creating at least 2 more scenarios, one which will be required to be limited to the NEPA environmental assessment area of potential impact, and one that may extend beyond its limitations, and then potentially a 3rd scenario to be defined and determined by the ESC if needed. So always a little redundant, but a little helpful just to remind everyone what it is, the charge that we've been given. Back to you, Gina.
Thanks, Nolan. Next slide, please. So I just want to remind people what we heard in the first work session from the community stakeholders. Next slide. There were 10 programming priorities that were identified as being important to the community. You will see in our when we present our concepts that the team has assessed these against our development assessment framework, which you all received a copy. I apologize that you got it today, to Jana's point, but the detail for how these concepts have been evaluated is in that document. We will be summarizing them on each of the concept slides. Next. And I'm not going to, these are the 10 ideas, creating a community development corporation that would control any land that comes back to the community, business spaces, Black sovereignty, food sovereignty and market, fresh food, affordable housing, rental land ownership, job training center. Next. Next slide, please. A health and wellness center, a community gathering space, a large outdoor community gathering space, a Black cultural center, and Black public monuments. So those were, as we moved into doing programming, designing and programming of possible concepts, we've kept all of this information in the back of, we've used all of this feedback from the community to try to think about how to organize these scenarios in ways that would accommodate and support the development of these kinds of facilities in the future in a restored community. So with that, what I would like to do is turn it over to Charles, who's going to sort of give you a little bit of an overview of the things that the kind of the parameters we've used to develop the design concepts. Charles.
Sorry, next slide, please. Yes, I'm Charles Kelly, and a principal at ZGF Architects, and my colleagues and myself will present the development concepts now. These are concepts for you to see the elements and the different configurations that you may take forward as a recommendation to the OTC to make improvement to the Rose Quarter Improvement Project. With that said, next slide, please. Thank you. This is an important site that the covers can address. It's at the intersection of Williams and Vancouver Couplet and Broadway Weidler Couplet. And it's an important node historically that unifies the spaces that historic Albina community used in the past, and the highway covers can deliver on that. Next slide. The question for us as your ICA team is to find a way to assess various degrees of the outcomes that reflect the ESC value statement, and with the addition of the voices that we've heard in the community in work session 1. And so our development assessment framework, which we've reviewed with the ESC and holds your state values and those of the community, have form an integrated tool that is being used to evaluate each of the concepts. And you have a testing memo that shows how deeply we have used your criteria against the metrics. The development assessment framework responds primarily to the multicolored circles, meaning a circle with no color means good, half color means best or better, and the final one full would be best. We've also done a similar analysis as we were developing concepts for the technical assessment, really trying to keep track of the benefit, either high or low benefit, with a challenge being high or low in achieving that benefit. And we are in this moment preparing these with you to review these 5 development concepts to help us determine what are the elements that you feel are important to look at more closely or more detail in our feasibility analysis to find the feasibility to maintain the project schedule, perhaps do it a little faster, and attract partners who can help this project be successful. Next slide. What I'd like you to consider as you're looking at these concepts is, what do we mean by an element? Well, we're really, each concept has a different way of locating ramp terminals as it was shown in the EA, and then as it was improved in the 20%. We've found additional means to make a few other elements or adjustments to the elements of ramp terminals and street classifications that increase in delivery of restorative outcomes that are desired by the ESC and the community. And there are 4 main big moves that deliver on that I'd like you to keep an eye on when my colleague Kate goes through each of the concepts. 1, to the degree that a concept, what are the elements that allow a concept to maximize land area created and designated for community organization? What elements create street edges that foster street activity comparable to the best places in Portland for this area? What are the kinds of, and third, what are the elements that separate local traffic from traffic accessing the ramp terminals and the freeway to create a positive, livable environment? And then finally, what are the elements that reduce air and noise pollution for those who would inhabit this space at this important node in the central city? So with that, with all that in mind, and thinking about your request of us to support the analysis for your recommendation, I'd like to turn it over to Kate to go through the elements of each concept. Kate?
Thanks, Charles. Next slide, please. Yeah, so I'm going to repeat a few things that Charles and Gina have mentioned. We have created 5 design concepts in addition to the EA. And these concepts essentially look at different arrangements of streets and ramps which provide various shapes and sizes of development parcels. And again, as Charles said, we looked at 4 big ideas to generate these concepts, but really with the community's priorities driving these studies. Next. So this is the EA, and just to orient everyone to the graphics, the highway is in the big gray arrow in the middle of the drawing. The ramps are shown in red. The major and minor streets in the area are shown in the black lines. We're going to show development parcels in a black outline with a gray fill. These will vary in each scheme as we look at how open space and buildings can be configured. And we're going to show an area of focus that relates to the development theme highlighted in yellow, which isn't on this particular drawing, but I'll speak to that in others. The major elements of the EA are 2 covers with open space. This design provides or improves the east-west connectivity with the Hancock to Dixon crossing and the Clackamas pedestrian crossing, both shown there with the number 2. And it creates a more pedestrian and bicycle-friendly environment, especially the movement through the covered open space. Another thing to note is this design proposes removing the north-south connection of Flint across the highway. We are also showing the development assessment framework evaluation, as Charles mentioned. It's a tool we're using to evaluate how well these concepts do as they relate to community outcomes we have listed under wealth, health, cohesion, and mobility. Charles mentioned the performance of the white, half, and full. So because the EA doesn't provide much development, this is scoring low for wealth and health. And while there is a large amount of green space, the other outcomes in the community cohesion evaluation aren't favorable. So cohesion is medium, and it is an improvement on the existing east-west connection, so it does score also medium for mobility. I also want to note that this is being shown as our base case. We know that the 20% design is slightly different and further along, but all of our other design concepts are evaluated off of this design. Next. So this is concept 1, which is very, very similar to the 20% design, but it makes some slight modifications. So we are proposing to shift the southbound off-ramp slightly east, hugging the main line as much as possible, which is shown at the number 1. By moving this over, it creates a larger parcel to the west of that, which is shown at number 2. But because these ramps really create a barrier to the development on Vancouver and Williams with less access and development potential, the focus area are shown on Flint and Broadway. So unlike the EA, we're trying to maximize the development potential on and around the cover. So you can see dark gray areas as potential building footprints. This does increase the ability to provide development for community wealth. There's also more opportunity for community cohesion. But because the ramps surround the development sites, we're still evaluating the scheme as low for community health. Next. So concept 2 explores moving the southbound off-ramp over to align with and replace Flint, which is shown at number 1. This also changes the alignment of Hancock across the freeway going straight and connecting with North Hancock as opposed to aligning Hancock to Dixon. This does restore part of the street grid, though we do lose the capacity and connection of Flint for local street traffic in this area. Because the ramps are now moved to either side of the cover, that focuses the energy sort of in toward Vancouver. And we have an opportunity here to create like a signature main street, which can connect all the way up to the north and northeast neighborhoods and all the way down to the Rose Quarter. So as we're providing more contiguous sites with the ability to provide both development and supporting open space, all of the evaluation circles are now rated up to medium. Next. So concept 3 explores merging Vancouver and Flint across the highway, shown at the number 1, which simplifies the traffic connections at the existing southbound off-ramp. Because Vancouver is no longer extending all the way down to Broadway. The northbound on-ramp has been moved north to Hancock, shown at the number 2. So these ramp and street configurations open up a larger development parcel between Flint and Williams that can be utilized for a number of different programs that Gina had mentioned earlier in sort of our top 10 community program outcomes. This southbound off-ramp, you can kind of see it poking out, still cuts through the site. So we're seeing more focused access and energy on Flint and Broadway. On this central parcel and where the number 3 is, we're showing some open space with some building footprints that can support Flint and provide connections to other amenities in the neighborhood. Again, this is just an example of development within this parcel. There are many different ways it can be configured. So while we have a larger parcel that can provide more opportunities for community wealth, health, and cohesion, we still have these ramps in between and surrounding our development. So we're still scoring medium on the development assessment framework for all of them. Next. So similar to the previous design idea, this concept merges Vancouver and Flint across the highway. However, we are proposing moving all of the interchange ramps to the south of Weidler. And now this allows for a large development of parcel again between Flint and Williams. And this particular scheme shows a linear park on the cover that's supported by buildings around it. There's a lot of opportunities in this option for cultural program, active ground floor program, business space, residential space, and many different community-oriented activities. You can see with the yellow highlighted area, this is sort of a centrally focused concept on and around the cover. Because we no longer have the freeway interchange impacts in this space, it opens up all kinds of opportunities for community wealth, health, and cohesion programs, and the mobility experience for pedestrians and bikes increases, so it scores all high. Next. Okay, so concept 5, we're calling restore the grid. This is also maximizing the land on and around the cover for development by, again, removing the existing on and off ramps in this area and relocating them to the south. But instead of a larger parcel like the previous design, this focuses on restoring the street grid within the existing street network. So utilizing Flint, Vancouver, and Williams, and extending Hancock across. This allows for consistent block sizes for development with a lot of access and continuity within the street network. This is also providing the most amount of land area of all the schemes. So there's a big opportunity to provide most, if not all, of the community's program and vision. So again, this is scoring high for all of the DAF circles. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Charles. Next.
Just one more slide above this, please. There you go. Yeah, so we of the 5, we have come to the conclusion that for your considerations, you're looking at elements that you would use to form a recommendation, that you could concentrate your thinking between concept 1 and concept 5, recognizing that as you move from 1 to 5, we are able to generate more, greater potential for restorative outcomes in this part of the central city, notwithstanding the benefits that are accrued through the DBE programming that ODOT and team have been working on. It's in addition to that. So it's really our sort of, we want to, as we go into our next our feasibility analysis, we're seeking your advice and guidance on which of these seem to make sense and create trade-offs that are in the interests that you've deemed valuable through your value statement. Next slide. We maybe the other way. There you go. Thank you. In our assessment is a way of using the whole value spectrum, recognizing that we're going into a deep feasibility analysis that will come back and report on the feasibility of the trade-offs of moving a ramp, or the impacts to the right of way, or the change in the sequencing of the intersections, and help you determine if that is in fact a friction towards keeping the schedule on track. But our hope and in our work for you is making sure that we're finding faster, cheaper, better options that are permittable and bring value to the community as charged. With that, I'd like to share, for my colleague Josh Peacock to explain what this range means, to give you a sense of the trade-offs at these either end of the scale. Josh?
Thank you, Charles, and good afternoon, everyone. If you could advance to the next slide, please.
Hey, Josh.
Yep.
President Peterson has her hand up.
Okay.
No, I'll just wait until we get to conversation. I'm sorry.
Okay. Josh, back to you.
All right, thank you. So as Charles mentioned, we're going to dive in a little bit closer on concept 1 and concept 5, the two ends of the spectrum. And what we're about to show is not the solution or the answer at this moment, but it's just really looking at what is possible within the canvas that is created by the ramp location and also the street network. So if you could go to the next slide. So with concept 1, as Kate mentioned before, with the ramps located along Vancouver and Williams, it scores lower on the DAF because of the cohesion that is created between these parcels. It does allow for opportunities along Flint and Broadway, but it does allow for some congestion in the center of the space. If you go to the next. And so just to kind of take a second to orient everybody, on the bottom right is the Moda Center. The gray line in the middle is I-5. To the left is looking north. To the right is looking south. What we show in yellow is residential multi-dwelling. So this could be, like Gina mentioned, rental, ownership, and affordable housing. What is shown in blue can be commercial development, also healthcare and wellness. What we are showing in magenta is the cultural programs. So this is a lot of the feedback that we got back from the community, farmers and food co-ops, multi-purpose spaces, cultural, job creations, job education, and a lot of the great energy that we can really create a neighborhood and a cohesive community. What is shown in red is the ramps, so coming along Vancouver, and then coming on to the interstate along Williams Street, and then the two interstates to the south. What we are beginning to show here is some opportunities to create a lively community, mixed-use development, looking along Flint Avenue, potential for a strong residential neighborhood at the ground floor, which is in this red color, really the opportunities to create vital, active streets. So this could have opportunity for small businesses, retail space, building services, and building program. Along Broadway and Weiler, really looking at opportunities to create some mixed-use development, mixture of commercial and residential, and continuing with that theory of active streets. So really first floor being active with mixed use development, retail, and building services. But the one thing that we really want to point out between option 1 and 5 is really here in the center. With the ramps between Vancouver and Weiler, what we're looking at this heart here is some of these community buildings and programs elements. But with the location of the ramps, the potential for noise and air pollution, we're really looking at these spaces as becoming more of an internal environment, but still could have a strong presence along Broadway Street. And one example of that is the August Wilson Center in Pittsburgh, that then begins to allow for a bunch of opportunities like that is shown between 1 and 5. Next, please. And so as we move into 5, as Kate mentioned before, with the potential to move the ramps to the south, it really allows for a ton of opportunities here in the center to allow for cohesion and to really restore the network that was once here before the interstate. So it allows for active streets along Hancock, Broadway, Vancouver, Williams, and then also Flint Street. And so the next slide. And so to the right, you'll see that with all the ramps moving to the south, it really begins to change the experience of what can happen here in the center. If you'll remember from number 1, we really had those program elements clustered together. Whereas here, we really think there's an opportunity to really spread those elements apart and create a lively and active space along Vancouver and also Flint and also Williams Streets. This allows for these program elements to really become the opportunity to have indoor and exterior experiences, a place to be for all seasons. It can also allow for it to have the opportunity to become more iconic, like the Cultural Center in Atlanta. It can really have its own identity of what feels right in Portland. But also more importantly, with the program elements on the lid, it allows for opportunity to have a mixed density of scales and building heights along this neighborhood. Previously, similar to the other ones, it was very important that we looked at a mixture of program types. So it really creates a lively and active neighborhood, but it allows for the cohesion to come back to this place that was once destroyed by the interstate. And so with that, I will pass it over to Olivia, and she'll go on into further information.
Thanks, Josh. If we can go to the next slide. Great. So I want to talk a little bit on leaving sort of the physical side of our scenarios about the governance and structure for delivering benefits to the historic Albina community and others. Let's please go to the next slide. So as we've talked about before, as we think about governance, we are really listening for first the community's priorities, which can help to define the roles and responsibilities that are required to deliver on those priorities, from which we will figure out what types of entities are best suited to fulfill those roles, and then look for where and whether those entities already exist in and around the project area and in and around Portland, or whether they need to be created or whether existing entities need to be brought together. Now, I'll just point out that we're sort of in this middle phase right now, where we've heard what's important to the community. We're thinking about the roles and responsibilities that are required to deliver on their priorities and the types of entities that can best fulfill those roles. You heard from Gina earlier that the community had raised, really wanting ownership and control over land, which aligns with a community land trust or community development corporation. But to fulfill all of the things that the community has indicated as their priorities, there may be a number of partners necessary to bring to the table to do things like creating a cultural center, creating and overseeing a cultural center, to creating and overseeing a fresh food program and market, et cetera. We can go to the next slide. And so we've been thinking about how this governance entity or governance structure, which may be made up of a number of different entities working together, might change over time, and how this would change the nature of the entity itself. Throughout the Rose Quarter Improvement Project, our QIP planning phase, we expect that the community will need to be able to continue to interact with ODOT and other project partners to set clear goals for delivering on their priorities through agreements and through agreements about the kind of reporting that entity or ODOT and its partners will do to be held accountable to agreements and promises made. This might take the structure of a community steering committee or similar, potentially something coming out of one of the advisory bodies or committees that already exists. Post-construction of the project, that's when we could see development of a community development corporation or a community land trust or a CLT, an entity that would take ownership or lease of the space on the covers and land on terra firma made available by ODOT for community use, and begin to plan for community-focused development, both physical real estate development as well as development of programs and assets to support community priorities. And then over time, as projects begin to operate, this could remain a central CDC, a conservancy, or multiple mission-specific nonprofit partners. So this might be an overarching CDC who is a steward for a CLT and other partners who champion or execute local projects and programs like job training programs, food production programs, parks maintenance, et cetera. As well as a CLT that manages and stewards land, as well as nonprofit partners working to develop high priority uses like affordable housing. So this slide is really just to illustrate that, you know, a governance entity will need to evolve and change over time. There are elements of this that, you know, are similar to ways that the community is already participating in this project. And some of those may require expansion to either welcome new partners or create new partners to help to move implementation to deliver on the community's priorities forward. We can go to the next slide. Thank you. And I want to talk about this idea that, you know, our team has been thinking about a lot and that we've been talking about now as we evaluate these scenarios around how we balance the way value is delivered to the community through this project, and particularly through the highway covers. On one end here, you have physical assets and land, and on the other, community development and funding. And so as Kate and Josh were just talking through the scenarios, one of the things that is, you know, quite different about the scenarios we've shown from 1 to 5 is the amount and quality of land that's provided for community use. And so on one side of this spectrum, you would have amount and quality of developable land for community control and use. On the other side of the spectrum, you would have community development funding. So funding for community programs, technical assistance to move those programs forward, et cetera. And the proposition that we're putting forward in our approach has been that any project that moves forward here should balance these things so that it's providing the same amount of value, regardless of whether that is delivered through land or community development and funding. And that we should be seeking to provide the maximum level of value to the community, regardless of which physical scenario of the covers gets built. Now, we've heard pretty strongly from the community stakeholders that we've talked to in this last work session that their preference is to have this in physical assets and land that they can control and use to deliver on their priorities. But of course, funding for community redevelopment initiatives is also critically important to being able to use new assets and land to deliver on that funding. So we're not, or to deliver on those priorities. So we're not prescribing one of these, but it is an approach that we'd like to keep in mind as we evaluate the scenarios and think about how the highway covers can be the most valuable to this community. And none of this negates the governance structure that we just talked about, which would still be required to sort of build trust with the community, have legitimacy with ODOT and its project partners, and have the capacity to execute on the multiple areas of the scope that we just talked about. We can go to the next slide. And I will turn it back to Gina.
Thanks, Olivia. So just one more bit of feedback that we'd like to share with you. We had our, could you go to the next slide? We had our workshops with the community stakeholders on the 15th and the 17th of this month. There were 50 attendees, 43 of which are Black historic Albina community members. And next, we did live polling related to, and can we go to the next slide, please? We asked them the question at the bottom at the end of the work session. Can you rank each concept in terms of how much the concept maximizes community benefits and provides restorative justice to the Black historic albino community in your mind, based on the things that they've said are important? And these are how the scenarios rank. So I think we just wanted to share this information and provide it back to you so that you would understand, where stakeholders out of the community are, how they're weighing in on which of these concepts they feel are most restorative and provide the greatest opportunity for community wealth, health, and cohesion long-term and moving forward. So with that, what I'd like to do is, first of all, see if there are questions that ESC members have about anything that's been presented. And then we have, we can go to the question slide. We do have questions that we want to ask you, but first I would like to know if there are questions from the ESC members that you would like us to respond to. And
thanks, Gina.
Yeah,
I will help facilitate that process. And
okay.
We had a hand up originally with President Peterson. So we will start with her.
Thank you. I just want to know if you have had a chance to think through how ODOT's announcement to the ESC today that they're looking at realigning the project to the west and what kind of impacts that has to the scenarios.
Charles, do you want to answer that?
Sure. I think that is, I think that's a good thing to consider, just as we would like to see less impact to surrounding areas due to the design of the highway cover. I think it's a good consideration to be taking forward in your recommendation.
Thank you. We will go to Janet.
I'm sorry, I don't understand that answer.
Don't want to skip that for sure. Thanks, President Peterson.
So our scenarios were developed before that idea was, that idea was not shared with us, so they don't reflect it. It would certainly be an appropriate guidance from your committee to instruct us, that we should roll that into our work. But those two things were emerging in parallel.
Thanks, Nolan.
President Peterson, is that helpful?
We got Jana and then Marlon, it looks like, right? Dr. Holt?
Yes, Jana. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I'm curious to know, you compared scenario 1 with scenario 5, and obviously scenario 5 has fewer ramps as a result of the construction. Are there substantial cost differentials in the development costs, in the construction costs, if you go with one over the other, and are those factored into some of this analysis in terms of the value statement?
They will be factored in the next stage of the work, but we're working right now with ODOT to understand what the baseline costs are so that we can do that kind of analysis. Charles or Nolan, do you have anything else you want to add in response to Jana's question?
No, not me. No, thanks.
I think just may I ask, since you're going to look into that, if in addition to the physical cost, if there's cost in terms of delay, timing delay, and the impact on the project itself. Thank you.
Good. Thank you for that, Jana. I think we have Marlon next.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Then Nate and then Bryson.
Hello. My question is for Miss Olivia. more concerned about the governance. So the folks that I've been talking to are really interested in knowing what type of partnerships or governance is going to be there to keep Black businesses and Black business owners supported. They're more concerned about the longevity of not here today and gone tomorrow, because we can say, hey, we're going to support them getting in, but what does that look like? What offices are going to be overseeing that? That's where a lot of the concern has been coming from the folks that I've been talking to. They know this thing is going to get built, but they want to see on paper or hear hard facts about what organization is going to be supporting this initiative, what government agency is going to be helping to lead keeping Black business owners in these areas. And when someone leaves a business or hands it off, how does it get to the next person? And
Olivia, do you want to provide some commentary in relationship to that concern?
Yeah,
Well,
I'll start, and then I welcome your and the rest of the team's input on this, Gina. Marlon, thank you so much for that question. I think one of the things that we have heard really clearly from the community is, I think, a similar message that you're reflecting, which is that there is a desire here for the community benefit to also be transferable through multiple generations. And that is part of why it's so important, I think, for community stakeholders we've talked to have what they are saying is sort of ownership and control of land. It provides the opportunity to do things like grant land or developable parcels to a community development corporation that could create an incubator program for certain jobs and certain skills. It provides the opportunity for that, CDC or a similar partner to create a hyper local job training program that spins out either people who are skilled to take on jobs throughout the city and the region, or spins out businesses that then can locate and operate throughout the area. It's part of the reason that I think we've really been exploring what a community land trust or CLT would look like here, and the structure of ownership that might go along with something like that, in giving people an opportunity to own land in a home or a building or space where their business is located, or frankly, the opportunity for some level of community-driven, potentially nonprofit real estate development that would create both affordable housing, but also could potentially create commercial space that is dedicated to a certain use. So there are a lot of models and a lot of different ways to do this. I think the best thing we can do is put all of those models on the table and tell you how they would work, and where we've seen them work successfully before, and then hopefully they can be applied to the scenario that is all of your recommendation going forward. Gina or anyone, please add on to anything I missed there, and I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I think that it's you've answered it well. I mean, it's to be determined, Marlon. I mean, it really, there will need to be a process. If these recommendations are advanced, there'll need to be a process to determine what that entity looks like, who's involved, who's supporting, the Black community stakeholders, and making sure that everything works according to the vision. And so but what we're going to do is try to provide examples and models of where it's been done successfully, so that you have that as a backdrop. So I think that's the best we can answer your question at this point in time.
Bryce and then Nate.
I think Nate was next. Nate?
Yes, thank you. Well, let me see how I want to frame this. I guess, and you kind of hit the chord earlier, Gina, but hearing some of the public comments earlier, leads me to believe that, as you said, the Black community is not monolithic, but certainly there are many voices that seem to not be popping up in the assessment or surveying, and no fault of anybody on this calls, but clearly there are some who believe that we need to be having conversations around long-term planning, which couldn't agree more. We do need to kind of reimagine how Lower Albina really economically impacts the community. And then we have others who believe that we need to do both, and we need to worry about what's on the table now. And it seems like that survey and, your work of many years ago, surveying the community around this project, that workforce opportunities, what Marlon was just mentioning about businesses, seem to be the missing piece in these conversations as far as who is out there. Who do we need to be worrying about now to kind of keep lively for a project like this? Because I think about businesses that won't be around during COVID. I think about young people who are still in these streets who won't be around because of COVID and no job. But yet I still continue to feel like we have these conversations about longer term plays, which again, need to happen, but we need to know the short term plays. And I'm just wondering, I guess my question being, are we, as we're talking to people, are we thinking about the voices we're not hearing from? And Gina, some of the people I might signal that need to be in these conversations that aren't. And I'm just wondering if in one of these meetings, let's just say an ESC meeting, if we need to invite some new folks to this conversation, that in front of all these ODOT and other stakeholders on this call, we can have the conversation in this format. Because I think you do a great job of trying to hit as many people as you can. But, with people with jobs, kids, everything else in the world going on, I don't know if people will honestly come to some of the segments that you guys are putting out there unless they know they're hearing the folks that maybe they haven't always trusted or they want to try to reevaluate trust with, being ODOT and some of the other players that are tuning into these calls. So I guess my question is, what are your thoughts about an engagement point where we can actually bring some of these community people to this forum? And Steve and Hope, this is off the cuff, but like have some of these people come into this space and have a 45-minute conversation. Because I just feel like our communities are always kind of pit against each other. And I think we got more in common than we do apart, but yet we don't have a holistic plan. We have short-term goals, we have some long-term goals, and nothing that threads the needle between the both. So just kind of more getting your vantage point, because you're right. You've been in the community a long time. You've seen this rodeo a million times over, but yet there's got to be something different about this. And I feel like there's two Black communities talking and none really talking to each other in a way to move the needle together.
So let me just make a couple of comments. And I do think that we should have further discussion about your idea and how we might facilitate a discussion and get people in the room cross-pollinated. However, what I would say to you is that I think part of why it feels like these things are not connecting is because they're really relating to different economic opportunities that the project delivers, okay? So, I mean, when you think about a highway cover, and we've talked about the highway cover and about designing the highway cover and restoring community, people are thinking about land and development, okay? And how to turn that opportunity on behalf of the community. When you're thinking about the contracting and the jobs opportunities that will be created by the work itself, people are focused just on that. And what I'm saying is that we collectively, I believe, in this community need to be focused on all of it, because those opportunities that provide land and opportunity to redevelop community have the ability to create long-term generational wealth, not just, and so do jobs. I mean, and jobs and economic opportunities, getting them, trained in new skills, being able to grow your business, your contracting business, all of that also creates generational wealth. But I don't think it's an either or. I think it should be a this and plus this, that we should be working on collectively and figuring out where the right, how to advocate for the right balance point as it relates to this catalytic project. And that's what I would, I would welcome an opportunity to see how we marry those things together so everybody's on the same page. So that's my response.
No, thank you, Gina. That's perfect. I couldn't agree more. Thank you.
Yeah. Bryson, I think you were next, and then President Peterson.
Yeah, so one thing I think will help once we get into the governance discussion is, the concept of taking a block of land or multiple blocks of land and then figuring out a community process with regards to development. I mean, that's what we've been working through in the Williams and Russell project, and there's been tons of things that we've learned that have been effective and tons of things that we've learned that have been ineffective. And I think when we get to that point, we'll be able to share some of the knowledge that we've gained there to help kind of shape the process a little bit for when we get to that here. Because yeah, there's been we've basically been able to test this out on one piece of land. Then we can apply what we learned there to multiple pieces here.
I think that would be a good conversation, for us to have as we go into this next phase of our work. So I would welcome that. President Peterson, and then I would like to take a couple more questions. We do have some specific questions we want you to respond to. So what I'd like to do is take the comments or questions from President Peterson and Brendan, and then see if we can move to our questions and get some feedback specifically to our questions. President Peterson.
Thank you. I just wanted to echo Nate's comments and to the power of 2 or 3. It's really important that we try to find a way to achieve both the short-term and long-term goals of this project. This project is so important to the future of the state economically, to this region economically, but to this community, it is everything in terms of being able to rebuild and reconnect, as well as the conversations around wealth creation and creation of place and the jobs that need to be generated from this project. So with that, I'm sure it's your next set of questions, but I'm going to just point out that the construct we were handed was that we needed to have one scenario that basically was a small change to the existing EA, and then some more aspirational ones. And so I find myself very torn as we go into this conversation that I'm not intrigued at all with anything related to a small change of the EA and what was proposed. I'm much more interested in the more aspirational conversations, and we were not provided the details on any of the other scenarios, but 1 and 5 in this presentation. So I guess I'm a little, we can go through the conversation, but I'm a little worried that you proceed for several months of good and intentional work, both with community as well as technical, based on that construct. That none of the, scenario 1-ish, that it didn't even meet wealth and health. So why would we even be looking at it? But the construct under your scope that we were not privy to keeps you to doing that. So I understand that, but I guess I want to push the bounds and say I'm not interested in anything that doesn't create health and wealth, right? That doesn't even come up high on the marks. And so I guess I just want to push the bounds a little bit here and say I'm much more interested in getting scenarios in detail that are much more at the other end of the spectrum that allow us to start merging some of these things together and not be held to something that doesn't actually move the needle on the things that we care about. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Bryson, one last comment or question before we move into.
Well, we were supposed to go to Brendan.
Oh, okay, Brendan, I lost his hand. I'm sorry.
Sorry, there's a lot to.
His hand disappeared, I guess.
Orchestrate. No, I lowered it. Real quick, I just want to make sure, back to Jana's point regarding getting, scope, schedule, budget, making sure the cost information is there, that you are provided the cost to complete report. So I just want to, Megan, I don't know if you're there now. I just want to make sure you are getting the right information from us regarding the cost so you can build that in. So Megan, have we been able to provide that to the ICA team?
Sure. Yeah. So we have provided the cost to complete report. I think the ICA team might have a couple other questions related to that. But just I see head nodding from Gina. Yes, the team has received the cost to complete report for that baseline cost information.
But we need to sit down with the team and I think Charles has already been expressed that, and really understand, pull that apart a little bit so that we know what the baseline is that we're actually evaluating our scenarios against. So we'll follow up with you. But yes, we have received, excuse me, the cost to complete report.
And Kristen, I see your hand. I mentioned earlier about the fact that we were, time compressed and really wanted to create a space for robust discussion. And so it's been very good to this point, and I certainly don't want to cut our knees at this moment. I know there are some other questions that the ICA team wanted to weigh in on. And so if I could do this, Bryson, I'm going to ask you to hold your comment, please. President Peterson, if you do the same, I'll hear from Kristen. We will go to those series of questions, and then, provided what the moment is, we'll circle back and give opportunities for others, as well as make sure that we hear from Chair Simpson. Kristen.
Thank you, Dr. Holt. Just a quick question. Well, maybe not so quick, but hoping it is. When we talk about sort of cost to completion, Brendan, where do we also get a sense of the total amount of community investment that may be required to really bring the full vision that's reflected in those plans to fruition, right? There's the technical cost associated with the construction, but to truly realize that vision is going to require additional funds and maybe outside of ODOT's scope, but where are we going to wrap our arms around sort of the total amount of community investment that's required here?
Yeah, no, that's a question, unfortunately, I can't answer, but I know, I don't know if any of the ICA team has any thoughts on that. I know we talked, Olivia gave up a little bit on governance and how we move forward on that, but that's kind of an unanswered question right now. I don't know if anyone here wants to tackle that one.
Charles, do you want to speak to that briefly?
Yeah, I think that our scope is letting us put together the costs and who are the partners that are going to hold those costs, and how we're going to fill those gaps is going to be from the private sector, and co-investing in projects, renting space, leasing it. I think we can rely on some public-private partnership that's held together with a governance structure. And I think in our work and our feasibility analysis, we're going to be looking at where are the gaps in just the infrastructure, basic infrastructure, where are the gaps that need to be subsidized until the private sector can pay back some of the value that has been invested in the area. So I think Olivia is on our team to understand that calculation so that we can leverage. We should have, for every $1 public investment in this project, we should expect or target $5 of private investment. We shouldn't be trying to hold the entire cost with one entity. We will just not be successful. Olivia, have I understated what we intend to do in our assessment?
No, I think that's essentially right. I would just add to it that, our concepts right now are quite high level. So we will be able to provide information like potential sources of funding, order of magnitude funding needed, the types of partnerships and deal structures that typically work for implementing these kinds of programs, without providing sort of a specific estimate for, you know, each and every phase and program that we would envision here. So it will be at a fairly conceptual level, but both seeking to demonstrate, you know, sort of the public sector return on investment of this work, and definitely the funding and financing mechanisms that would be needed to carry it forward.
Excellent. If we could move into that next section,
Yep.
Gina, that'd be
Yep,
great. Thanks.
we move to the slides, Amber, please. So can we stop here? So I think what we, you know, concept one, President Peterson just sort of spoke to this, has design elements that fall within the limits of the EA, and design criteria and improve upon the performance of the base case in relationship to the community's restorative justice outcomes. Concept 5 has design elements that have the strongest alignment with the Black historic albino community's expectations for restorative justice outcomes, and also rank the highest against the ESC values and outcomes as represented in our development assessment framework. So those are kind of the two ends of the spectrums. I guess this is kind of to the point that you made, President Peterson. Are there other concepts that have elements that you would like to see the ICA team do further analysis on? And we can go back through those concepts if we need to, but as we were presenting those, are there key elements that you think we need to look more closely at as we do this deeper dive in the next phase of our work? So that's a question to the ESC. I guess I'll just run through them so you know what we're hoping to hear from you. And then do you recommend that we evaluate any of these elements, the ones that I just mentioned, as we refine concepts 1 and 5 to improve their outcomes or trade-offs? What information do you want to see in the final feasibility analysis from our team to assess the trade-offs? And do you recommend we study a third scenario? And if so, what elements need to be in it? And then finally, is there agreement? Do you have agreement about the approach of delivering value by maximizing community benefits through some combination of providing land and funding for community priorities? So could we talk about the first item and whether there are elements that people noticed as we went through the concepts, the 5 concepts that were of design elements that were of interest to any of the ESC members that they would be interested in seeing us look more closely at?
Dr. Holt, I have to jump in quick because we're at 5:08 for honoring the 5:35 questions on an ESC group of this scale. Sounds like that's going to take a lot of clock.
Yes, sir.
I'm a clock person. And so with that being said, I just want to get these things out there very clear and concise because I feel like I'm just like a broken record over and over and over. I believe the goal here was to work on options, concepts, however you want to frame them, that would actually enable us to continue to stay within the actual schedule. I mean, if it's not going to stay within the schedule, that leads me to believe that that would trigger a delay. By triggering a delay, that would increase costs. By increasing costs, you're now making the project not attractive. By making the project not attractive means the project is probably not going to happen. When we started these conversations 2 years ago, everybody agreed that the project should happen. If we don't want the project to happen, I think we should say that right now. If we want the project to happen, then we need to be clear in our outreach efforts that we have boundaries. If you're going to tell your child Anybody, go to the store, go, got a, $100 to go buy some groceries, right? But then they're at the store and they're like, well, I want these shoes and I want this coat. Okay, well, is it within the $100? No, I'm actually at about 500 now. Okay, well then what are you doing and what are you thinking about here? We have to stay within the boundaries. And I feel like sometimes the pie in the sky is great, obviously. We can create whatever ideas and concepts we want. We can draw all pretty pictures, but if people don't even understand what they're signing up for and what they're agreeing to and not agreeing to, then all they are is confused, which furthermore justifies that this is another new model of exploitation of people who don't understand public processes and how these things work. I don't want to exploit people. I don't want to confuse people. I want to be very clear and concise about what it is we're talking about here. And I feel like sometimes we get into these siloed approaches and we have these pretty pictures and we talk about things, but it really doesn't yield anything. If we're talking about land, I mean, let's be honest. This is prime real estate. So the amount of time and effort it would take to even create a P3 model like that, where we talked about 20% public investment on a real estate and development, at the end of the day, is that other capital, is that going to be leveraged by a group of Black developers, Black real estate owners? Is it? Is it not? Who in this community has that sort of capital when we look at the size of those structures on these pictures? Let's just say it's a $20 million project. LTVs right now are 70%, so that's $6 million cash you got to have on hand or assets available to be able to build something like that. Unless you're going to leverage public resources. So does the community understand this? Are we having those kind of conversations? I don't think we are. And so it's not fair to the public for people to be misconstrued as to how this thing's going to play itself out. We have two different scenarios here. We have a highway project, which obviously has some form of a cap, and then we have a community real estate development project concept. It's two separate agencies. And when people are thinking about this and they're hearing like, oh, restorative justice, yeah, well, what's the opportunity here? Okay, well, I just want you guys to know there's one piece to this. However, there's this whole other segment that has nothing to do with ODOT and this project. It's kind of tied to it, but it really has nothing to do with ODOT. And to me, this is the part of the process that we're confusing people. And to me, I feel like it's exploitation, because you're not actually getting to the real honest piece here as to why we're having these conversations and what is it going to mean for the Black community. We talk about restorative justice, and we keep saying community visioning, and then we have terminologies like restorative justice, and then we say Black community, but we're not being consistent with our messaging. Be very concise, be consistent, and don't confuse people. The one other thing that is really intriguing to me is on these matrices. Who decided something is going to be color coded, fully colored, and what's going to be half color coded? Who decided that? Is there a number of scale? Was it a community outreach project that said, yeah, we believe that if it has this impact or if a house is this close to the highway, it should be ranked this number? Did we do all those things? How did we come up with those conclusions? So those are the things that are really concerning to me, because it's the messaging. And when I hear the public testimonies, I'm like, what is going on here? This is confusing. If you're confusing me, then how is everybody else out there going to actually really understand what we're talking about? And again, I've been involved with this for 2 years. So I've got to see the people come and the people go, and the people who want things and the people who are demanding things. And I've got to entertain all of this, but at the end of the day, I just feel like this is not really moving the outcomes forward. It's going to just further delay and create more confusion and hurdles, which furthermore will never, in the end, benefit the community we're talking about, which is the Black community. And so these Gina hit it spot on, because she mentioned at the forefront that she didn't want these comments and these suggestions that are coming back out to have people jumping into these camps, which leads to us being polarized, right? Exactly. And I think Nate just articulated it earlier. You know, you have two different segments of the community. Until we can get to a concise message as to this is what the Black community, I'm not going to start speaking vague terminology, Black community wants. This is what the Black community decided we need, we want, we're asking for, we're demanding. Until that happens, it's just going to be a lot of confusion here. And we're going to be dealing with confusion until we actually can make that happen. So I'm curious as to, with this group here, who is going to make the concerted effort to start working towards bringing those people together? Because if that doesn't happen, the last group that's going to benefit off of these billions of dollars of investment in real estate development opportunities are not going to be Black people, period. It won't. And everybody knows that is the actual truth.
So do you want a response from us? I mean, clearly you had a lot that you were, that you wanted to comment on, but do you want a response to any of those comments? Or, you know, our process, I just want to clarify one thing. Our process was to create, we were charged by ESC, by OTC through, and then with ESC being the, you know, sort of the independent overseer of our contract to create design alternatives. And we were charged with creating one that was inside and one that was outside. So we weren't just charged with creating things that were within the boundaries. I just have to clear that up. We're not going rogue here as a team. We're not doing things that are outside of our contractual responsibilities. We are, and you guys are the ones who are managing and overseeing that contract and the scope of that contract. So if this was an issue, it's quite possible that this should have been dealt with back in, you know, October in terms of redoing the scope of our contract, you know, but this is where we're at now. And then the only other thing, Chair Simpson, that I want to say is, I don't think anybody's trying to confuse. We're trying to create a new model. ODOT's trying to do business differently. It's trying to talk about community development. It's, you know, we're trying to be creative here. So it's really about trying to essentially think about how we can do business differently, not only in the contracting arena, but also in the creation of value that these projects create in communities, and how the historic community can benefit from that as well. So we're in uncharted territory, okay? So I give you that, but I don't think that we're in a place that is intended to take people off course. And, you know, we don't know how much this will delay. I have to say to you, without the city at the table, there isn't a time frame on this project. They have to permit this project. Without the city at the table to say, we will permit what you're designing, you don't have a project yet. So you could have 2 years of delay beyond what we've got now. So we've got kind of you know, a very dynamic envelope, and all we're trying to do is say, are there better ways that we could create those covers that would provide greater benefit? And can we do it cheaper? Can we do it in the timeframes that we're talking about? We haven't even been allowed to, we're supposed to be independent. We haven't even been allowed to finish our work. And, you know, so I think we've got two months left. All we're trying to do is finish our work, and then you guys can throw it out. You know, you can throw it out if you want to stay on course where you're at, and you feel that considering anything else, that will be the prerogative of the Executive Steering Committee. So,
thanks, Gina. There's one last thing is the question that I was going to finish with was, how do we achieve restorative justice and stay on schedule while staying within the environmental assessment?
You're not in the environmental assessment. What Megan's talking about in terms of moving that may take you out of the environmental assessment.
I'm fully aware, but Megan is just talking about it in the context of that is an
so are we
being discussed. So
are we. We're just.
So I know, but I'm saying, how do we do all those things while staying within it? Is the actual question on.
Yep. We're going to look at that. We're going to look at whether we're really the combination of impacts that any one of these scenarios creates is going to take us outside. You know, if we're changing some of the elements and the relationship of the elements, it may not have the kind of significant impact that everybody looks at the concepts and says, this is going to take us completely off course. And so I think we're just all trying to, we want to move forward and be able to finish the work so that you guys can, this is the executive committee's prerogative. We just want to be able to finish our work so you guys can deliberate. We want to know what you want to see from us in terms of analysis so that we can, you can do that, your deliberations, and feel like you've had what you needed in order to assess any alternative cover scenarios.
Orlando, can I
before you go, Charles.
Well, I just want to say one thing.
Charles, hold on. Thank you.
Thank you. I apologize for
I
interrupting.
appreciate it, and the privilege of chair and exercising that. We are at 20 minutes after 5, and I want to defer again to you, sir. You identified that the time frame for this discussion on the questions that were outlined most likely wouldn't afford us to finish by 5:30. I highlighted that before we got going. How would you like to proceed as it relates to the items that you've identified? There are some hands up here. We want to give space for that, but I want to defer to your wisdom here, sir.
I mean, obviously we're going to run out of time, and I definitely think we need to allow more space to have these transparent conversations with stakeholders and being very direct about what all these things entail and what they require and what kind of sacrifice and equity is going to you have to put on the actual table. But for me personally, all I'm trying to do is feel confident that when I convey back to my fellow commissioners, this is something I support 100%. And that's all it is. I don't want to be insecure. I don't want to be confused. I don't want to feel like if I were the person who was just, out there trying to understand what this is about and not really understand how all the pieces work together because I heard about I'm going to somehow have some business space for my cookie operation and now I'm going to be able to grow my business. That's not reality. Like, we have to be very clear about what we can and can't do if we're going to be talking about restorative justice. But again, those pieces are not going to be able to come at this stage because, as we all know, real estate development, especially community developments, take years. And again, it's not going to work unless you can attract private capital. And so there's going to take time to be able to do all that due diligence. And so all I'm saying is, like, I want to be confident and secure as I convey back to my fellow commissioners. This is something that the group believes in. This is something that I believe in. This is something that the community believes in, and we definitely need to move forward with it, So.
Thank you, sir. Charles, and then I will go to a couple of the comments. I know, Megan, you wanted to give some context.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think we fully hear the importance of the schedule and the project, and we have talked numerous times internally with the team on how to manage the risk to schedule in any alteration to the project, and that is going to be the focus of our feasibility study that we're going to be starting, or we've started, that we can finalize by the next time we're with you. But we fully support giving you the tools to manage the schedule and be clear on what the trade-offs you're making and whether or not they're worthwhile on a short-term or a long-term basis. And that will be your prerogative to assess those. And I think we want to give you that opportunity, Chair Simpson.
And I think out of respect of individuals like Jen and all of us who, pay for fuel at the gas pump, is whatever we come up with, and if it's outside of what's already been, essentially authorized, I think how's it going to be paid for, really, and I think that's the part of this collaboration and coalition building in this effort, instead of this polarizing conversation, because we're going to have environmental constituencies who don't want the freeway at all, or the improvements to the freeway at all. You're going to have community members who are saying, hey, this doesn't achieve my definition of restorative justice. And then you're going to have other folks that think more technical, more engineering standards and more permitting processes that, are way out of my bandwidth. So how do we bring all those pieces together and create something that obviously works, not only just for everybody on this call, but more importantly for the state of Oregon? And I think that sometimes we get confused because we keep thinking about this is about this one little silo piece here. This is for the region, this is for the state. And I think once we kind of refocus that, And obviously it's a process. So Gina, I appreciate every sacrifice that's gone into this and all the outreach and time and effort. But myself and a couple others are the only ones who don't have any financial gain out of this. So that's why I'm going to be free and transparent, to be honest, because there's nothing for me to benefit off of this. Yeah. I'm just going to call it as I see it. And so as I call it as I see it, I want to make sure that it's going to be something that we can stand up and feel very proud and confident about as we move forward, because this is a catalyst to much larger conversation when we talk about regional congestion issues.
Thank you. Gina, I'm going to ask you to hold your comment for one moment. Thank you. I want to go get some of the questions in. Megan, you wanted to contextualize something, and then I think it was Jana, then President Peterson, and then Bryson. So.
Sure, just a quick statement around the sort of NEPA process and right-of-way impacts. I just want to NEPA nerd out for a second here. So a right-of-way impact isn't necessarily a thing that would like trigger a new or expanded environmental process. It's really about the magnitude of that impact. Yeah. So what's on that property? You know, is it a historic structure? Is it parkland? You know, what services would that particular property provide? Does it result in a disproportionate impact to an environmental justice community? So I just wanted to state that like it's less about like being within or outside of a line drawn on a map, and more about the magnitude of the impact in terms of type and scale. So I know that there's more work to be done on both accounts for the array alignment piece, as well as the ICA team's concept, but I thought that might be just some helpful context to provide in terms of the sort of ongoing extension of the NEPA process into project development.
I think it is.
That's right. Thank you very much, Jana.
Thank you. I want to thank you, Chair Simpson, for making the comments that you have, because along the way, I am one of those people that has gotten confused about what we are working on. I was involved with the passage of House Bill 2017. I am involved in discussions now that the legislature is engaged with how to finish funding this project in the Rose Quarter. And anything that is going to delay that or change the process and delay the timeline has a huge impact, not just for the community in Portland, but for the state as a whole, because that section of freeway is what feeds Oregon's economy. I think what we all need to understand is, and I try to tell this to every group I talk to, is that the trucks that are picking up goods and bringing raw materials in to Portland, to Oregon-based businesses, or going to the port are using that section of freeway. The trucks from out of state that are hauling goods between California and Washington or Mexico and Canada are taking 205. So the reason we need to get this section of freeway fixed and fixed soon is because it has a huge impact on our ability to not only recover from COVID, but to grow our economy here in this state. And so I'm less interested, and that's why I ask the questions about cost, and I care about the environmental assessment and whether that's going to create delay for us, because at the end of the day, we're 4 years into this and we're still talking basic details, and I'm a little frustrated. I will share that with everybody. So thank you.
Thank you. President Peterson.
Thank you. Just to let everybody know, I just got a text from my dad that he was diagnosed with cancer. So I'm just going to be a little not on point right now, but you know, I guess what I just wanted to say is I'm very appreciative of the conversation that we're having right now, because these are some of the issues that needed to be discussed, to try and bring us back and focus myself as well. We're being asked today to, on very short notice with very little information, to come down to 2 scenarios to have more conversation about and have more analysis on. And it was through the great leadership of the OTC and Orlando and Brendan that we have come to this point where we're having conversations about how to make short-term and long-term impacts on wealth creation within the Black community. And so I don't want to overlook that. I don't think that any of the conversation from my perspective to date points to any of us trying to derail the project. I think we are all very committed to getting both and all of the objectives done. And as my professor at Portland State University, Cy Adler, said, there's multiple vague and conflicting goals in everything that we do, and we need to reconcile those. So my point about I'm fine with moving ahead with scenario one, but I don't have the level of information to be able to tell you whether 4 or 5 are the best, but they really struck a chord with me. I like the idea of moving the interchange to the south and getting it out of the frickin' neighborhood. We've done that too many times in this region, whether that's the Ross Island Bridge or other neighborhoods that we've destroyed by putting interchanges through them. I like the idea of being able to maximize our potential for future development. I like the idea of being able to create a community by removing all of the traffic from it. So I think if we could have more conversation and get more detailed information. We were only presented 1 and 5 in detail. I do not have the information on 4. And maybe there's others that want more information on the others, but I feel like there's rushing to a conclusion for a short-term gain, and then there's blowing yourself up in the process. And I think we need to weigh somewhere in the middle of that. And I appreciate the need to get construction jobs out, because that's what we were trying to do with the transportation measure that would have provided $5 billion worth of work to this region. But that went down. So now we have these projects that are actually on the table left to get construction jobs out. But if we aren't careful and we don't think about the long term and we don't analyze it, and then I'm afraid that there are generations that will disbenefit from a short-term gain. So let's just be careful about how we proceed and we listen to folks about.
Thank you, President Peterson. Appreciate it, and a heart and compassion for you and to your family. Yeah, Bryson.
Yeah, so I'm going to second what President Peterson just said, and kind of I actually address some of the questions that were up there. I think 4 is another one that I would definitely like to see more detail on, and kind of one of the things between 4 and 5 that seems to be kind of the main difference between those two concepts is looking at the trade-off between having that extra street and that extra throughway and the more development that comes with it compared to the green space that 4 has. And so, is maximizing development to the highest degree that we possibly can, is that going to be the best way to achieve our goals, or is there some role that a more open space could play in achieving those goals? I think that really kind of for how we look at some of this stuff going forward. I mean, I think one additional thing to add to kind of address this previous conversation is, I'm operating under the assumption that we wouldn't be proposing. We're not sitting here looking at stuff that's complete in total fantasy, and that you've taken the time to really think through what's been done and come up with ideas that maybe a little bit more difficult than some of the other things, but are still within the realm of reality. And so we're not dealing with any options here that are in fantasy land.
Thank you, Bryson. Chair Simpson, it looked like you were ready to make a comment as well.
It was just a real quick one, and it's just to bring it back full circle. The point of my contention was really predicated on seeing an option out there that would essentially disrupt all the time and investment that's gone into this and extend it, which I'm not a fan of. Because again, this is free. I could be hanging out with my children right now, and I'm talking in circles on things that aren't really relevant to actually getting to a real outcome if it's talking about extending it. So that's where my personal heartache is, even though I'm very passionate about seeing this play itself out. But ultimately, I really appreciate all the work everyone's done and the sacrifice and hard work that's gone into this. I'm really hoping Megan or someone with more technical skills can actually maybe give the group here and any message that goes out to the broader public. Like, I don't know how it is. I know you guys, we just talked about earlier, defining what the impact is that would trigger an additional environmental review, but maybe there's some kind of hypothetical map that says, here, this is your playground. This is what you get to work within. Now, create your utopia of a community, whatever you deem is necessary, right? I think by having that there, then it kind of keeps us in these boundaries, and then we stay in the bounds. And then with those boundaries, we talk about pricing and budget and schedule and all those different things, so people know actually, okay, well, these are the Legos I get. These are my pieces I get to use in order to build what it is we think is going to be beneficial to the broader community as it pertains to restorative justice issues and challenges that people are facing. And I think by figuring out those boundaries, I think that's going to really help keep things more concise and not get so pie in the sky and so vague. And I just don't know if that's an option that we actually have at our disposal right now or not.
Thank you, Chair. Gina?
So I think our consultants are going to look at that. They're going to look at really sort of the environmental assessment that was done and try to figure out, what would be in and out based on the baseline. I think it would be helpful if ODOT weighed in on that in terms of their perspective as well. So we're all on the same page, and we're all operating off that same play sheet, so that we're not creating different play sheets, and then it sort of creates confusion again. I guess there are some things that I'm hearing, and then I want to suggest, I want to see whether I've heard that we need more discussion around this given the next phase that ICA is going into. And I'm wondering if there needs to be a follow-up soon of this group to really talk through this in more detail. And I'm just going to put that out there and see if that's an option. The other thing I think that from the comments that have been made that we're hearing is that 1, 4, and 5 at least are worth studying. I know, President Peterson, you want to look at all of them to see if there are other elements that should be studied as well. But at least we know we can start moving forward that cost and constructability are important elements, and timing and schedule are.
I have a response. I have a suggestion around that.
Yeah.
So we can get some specifics. As was stated, we want to make sure the executive steering committee members have appropriate opportunity to look at the information. And since they didn't get the packet within a timely fashion, my request is that you look at the information and then identify within the information the scenarios that you'd like to see expanded on, or whatever questions you have, and you can facilitate all that to me. You can send all that directly to me. And if I could have those questions, comments, and thoughts by this Friday, that would be extremely helpful. And I will make sure it gets into the hands of the ICA, and we will go over and interact around it. And that way, we've got some time to look and also some time to work on the findings. And then we will do and continue to do the best to make sure that anytime you're being asked to weigh in, think about, give comment on that you've got enough time to assess, be prepared to come in and execute in that manner during the meeting. So want to make sure you're getting your information in advance.
And then I guess the other thing that we might share is the discussion about the special meeting, if
Yeah, we're going to talk about that. You bet.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Bryson, you had a real quick comment.
Yeah, I mean, I think there is one other thing that Alando brought up that would be helpful to go over at some point, which is the different timelines. I mean, obviously there's the highway construction, on-ramp construction, street construction piece of these, and then there's the development of the plots of land themselves, which don't necessarily follow the same timeline. And so I think it would be good at some point to go over that so we can see what impacts what and what that process looks like. And then when we communicate to people, we can say, when we get a building, it goes on this timeline, that kind of thing.
I love that, Bryson. And in fact, there should probably be an analysis and a very concise, clear, simple message to the community, or should we say Black community, as to, are there parcels of land that already have been earmarked, that have already been acquired, that are already budgeted for? So then that, things like that can show that it's going to obviously have a more quicker turnaround times in terms of actually getting to actual real estate development as opposed to infrastructure development. So I think those are the types of things that need to be conveyed to the broader public.
Thank you, sir. Julia, I noticed your hand.
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to clarify to make sure that having the instructions correct. By this Friday, we get you additional questions, or our sort of entities feedback on the questions that were presented, or both?
Both. Both
Okay.
would be fine. Yes.
Great.
Thank you for the clarifying question.
I can't just speak for the whole entity, and given how close it is to the Blanchard headquarter building, I just need to get more input. So we will send those to you when we have our feedback and our questions.
Thank you very much. And I want to also appreciate the fact that as much as we could, we respected our principles of agreement and interaction. My preference is not to raise my voice in this moment, in this meeting. However, as the facilitator, the thing that we've got to be careful of is over speaking one another, especially me. And so when that is happening, that's when I will be more direct. As you noticed, it was not personal toward anyone. It was absolutely about maintaining order and structure in this environment. It's important that we create space for interaction, and we're going to have times in this space where conversations are robust and passion is going to happen. Passion is a good thing. Passion means it's something people care about, and that's awesome to be in a space like this and create opportunities for that. Thank you for giving us some extra time tonight, and I know that there are some things that are still outstanding. We understand that. We're going to wrap up our moments together, and I want to do that by introducing Erica Warren, who is going to highlight a couple things for us. Miss Erica.
I just want to say I appreciate the passionate discussion. It says to me that we have a lot of people who care about this community. So I am hoping that some of these alternatives that I'm going to present will materialize so that we have an opportunity to continue this conversation. So there are thoughts around having joint meetings between the Executive Steering Committee and the Historic Albina Advisory Committee in the month of May. Currently, the dates we're looking at, so we'll be coordinating with you in regards to your schedule. Currently, there's a meeting scheduled for May 18th. We would like to combine the two committees, and then again on May 24th to be able to continue the conversation with the Executive Steering Committee, the HAB, and the COAC, the Community Oversight Advisory Committee. Some of that may address Nate's concerns in regards to bringing those specific areas of the community together. So we have the stakeholders from the workshops that represent a certain part of the community. We have the HAB, some of our community stakeholders and leaders in our community of some of the Black organizations. And then we also have the COAC that are working in regards to the DBE workforce mentorship development opportunities. And I think that those groups need to come together to have some of this real authentic conversation. So again, be looking at your calendars. We'll be reaching out in regards to May 18th and May 24th. And then additionally, looking to have a joint work session on June 1st with the Historic Albina Advisory Board and the COAC, where the ICA would present Workshop 3. And then for you all as the Executive Steering Committee, looking towards June 7th potentially to have a longer engaging conversation with the ICA team around more of these issues. So I just wanted to briefly state that for you all here, and make sure that you are looking out for those invitations to see if we can coordinate schedules. Again, thank you so much. Dr. Holt, back to you.
Thanks, Erica. I appreciate you highlighting that. Brendan, you had a comment.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we didn't talk about it too much tonight, but what's been very important about this process of how we centered, and Erica, thank you for your leadership in facilitating the Historic Albina Advisory Board, and how they will be kind of the first ground but will be the first one evaluating and giving recommendations around the ICA work. Just wanted to, didn't hear that tonight, so just wanted to put that out there. Thank you for facilitating that. Obviously, count me in for all those meetings. Look forward to it.
Everyone, we appreciate you. Please stay safe, take care of yourselves, and President Peterson, big hugs.
Thanks, everybody, for your time and for the robust discussion. We appreciate it.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.